Hello guys, welcome to another video, and this one I wanted to do a bit of feedback on my personal start for the launch of Path of Exile 2, my progress on the Warbringer, and a bit of important feedback for Path of Exile 2, and just my general first impressions of playing the game for a long time. Obviously I did get to play in LA, but you know, this is the actual launch now. Let's start off with the Warbringer, because you know, that's the main thing that I was planning to start, and I did start on a warrior. And I'm also playing in Standard League, which is obviously kind of normal trade league, but I haven't done any trading yet. And that's because I really wanted to get a feel for, you know, how solo gearing is going to feel in this game, because they've done a lot of changes to the way our gear progression works compared to Path of Exile 1. There's no kind of crafting bench there. It's a very different kind of crafting bench. And gear progression generally feels very different. You're supposed to get more currency orbs, which is true, you do get more currency orbs. But overall, I would say that there is a little bit of a problem right now with gearing, and the problem is Artificer's Orbs. So, Artificer's Orbs are a new currency in Path of Exile 2. They add sockets to items, and early on, you're supposed to be using those sockets for runes. Runes are dropping quite commonly, and there's different types of runes, and when you apply a rune, you know, to a weapon, it might give you an offensive benefit there, something like added damage or leech or something like that. And when you put it into an armor piece, it gives you resistances typically, or maybe a little bit of flat life or something like that. So runes, I actually found a lot of runes. I have a bunch of runes in my bank, I've got loads of them. But the big problem there is that I do not have enough Artificer's Orbs. That's the currency that you use to add sockets to gear. And you can get Artificer's Orbs by salvaging items that already have sockets on them. You kind of build up shards towards an orb over time. Now, the big problem there that I've had is that I'm currently around halfway through Act 3 on the Warbringer, and I've only seen 2 raw Artificer's Orbs dropping, and I've got a third one from salvaging, and that's it. So 3 Artificer's Orbs up till now in progression, and that means that my gear is in such a poor place where I have really low resistances, and I can't really do anything about it. There's no, like, easy way to kind of solve resistance problems. You know, in Path of Exile 1, you can always just craft a suffix. Anytime you find an item with an open suffix, you can just craft that resistance on there, and that feels really nice, being able to solve any holes in your build. And in Path of Exile 2, it doesn't really feel like that. It feels like there's no obvious way for you to be able to solve these problems, other than kind of, you know, having a good vendor reroll that then offers you an item which is good for your build, or perhaps it offers you an item which is blank but it has a socket on it already, so you're able to craft that item up and use that. Or finding a good item off the ground, for example, is another thing, which, that's great. I think it's really nice if it feels like you can pick up an item off the ground and use it in your build, and that's a very real possibility. But overall, I do get the impression that my personal progression for the game has been hindered by the fact that there's just not enough Artificer's Orbs, and that's literally the only problem as well. I think generally, other currency items are dropping frequently enough for them to feel useful and feel like you can use them. I've been using Exalted Orbs quite a lot, you know, to add modifiers to items. I've been using Alchemy Orbs when they've dropped to craft rare items, and I've been using my Transmutes and Augments a lot. But the big problem I'm having is it's just a resistance issue, due to not being able to have sockets on my gear to then use those runes that I have. I've got loads of runes, but I can't use them. So that's the one really big important piece of feedback that I give. For solo progression, without Trade League, I think Artificer's Orbs need to be a bit more common. Right now they feel too rare. So moving on to the Warbringer, I started on the Warrior. Early on I felt really, really strong in Act 1. I was just steamrolling all of the bosses. No problems at all, going all the way through Act 1. And into Act 2, sort of especially towards the end of Act 2, I started to hit a bit of a wall in terms of progression there. Felt like my damage was really falling off, and also I just felt very squishy. You know, mobs were really chunking me. Even white mobs were hitting me for like a third of my HP or something like that. Just getting swarmed. That's kind of comes back to that Artificer's Orb problem there, because if I had Artificer's Orbs to be able to apply those runes to my gear, that problem basically wouldn't have existed, because I would be able to have, you know, 10, 20, or even 30% more on each resistance, and that way I would have then been in an okay place to continue. So I feel like you can probably continually farm zones and overgear a bit if you want to, And you probably do find a lot more Artificers in doing that, and you'd be overgeared on the zone level, which means you would be naturally stronger. But if you're kind of trying to keep on pace with the zone level, I feel like there's not enough of those orbs dropping, so progression is a bit hindered. So around this time when I hit that wall in Act 2, I decided that I wanted to level a different character and see how it felt on a ranged character that was more reliant on gem levels rather than weapon damage. So I leveled a witch, and I leveled all the way to the middle of Act 2. I think I was around level 22 or 23. And generally, I would say ranged casting feels so much better for normal gameplay, just killing packs of monsters, because you can just kite backwards while you're using your spells, and that means that monsters generally just ball up into a blob that you can then, cleave them down. Whereas with melee, you feel like you're always attacking that pack of monsters from one angle, and that means that you always end up with monsters kind of behind you, and if they're not getting hit by that early flurry of area of effects that you have, you're then feeling like there's stragglers that you have to kill with your, auto attack or something like that. So I would say overall, the Witch felt better for killing packs of monsters, not necessarily for bossing though. The Warrior felt more comfortable for bossing because it really feels like you can move around the boss in melee range. It feels easier to avoid things. And the Witch generally felt squishier overall, which is true, I didn't have as much life. But it also was the case that you're just not getting hit as often on the Witch because you're able to kite backwards and things like that. But on the Warrior, I'm currently still using Earthquake, Shockwave Totem, and Rolling Slam. Rolling Slam feels like really good damage. Earthquake is good as well, but it takes a long time to go off, so it always feels like whenever you're using that combo, you need to drop the totem, which takes a while, and that doesn't feel very nice if you're just killing, a few white monsters in a pack. But soon I'm going to be able to unlock Stampede, and I'm really looking forward to using that, because that's a very good ability. And once I actually have that, I'll also be grabbing my second Ascendancy point there for the negative armor breaking, which is going to be interesting to see how that works out. We actually got a confirmation of how that works. It's capped by how much armor a monster has. So if a monster has 750 armor, it will be able to go minus 750 with that node. So that is quite good, because especially bosses are going to have a lot of armor, and that means you're going to be able to take them into quite a lot of negative armor there, and that should be quite useful for amplifying your damage. But one thing I'd like to actually talk about is the Warbringer nodes, because when I actually ascended on the Warbringer, I decided to take the totem node first, because I had enough gold to do a bit of respecking, so I felt like I wanted to actually try out the totems to see what those minions did. So if you're interested to find out what the minions do on the Warbringer, I can kind of go over them now. They're the Karui monsters, or the Karui NPCs, whatever you want to call them, from the Trial of the Ancestors in PoE1. In that league, if you played that league, you might remember what those monsters did, but there's kind of like a Karui general or whatever it is that uses a Warhorn, and that one gives you a buff. I think it's around 5 or 8 second buff that increases your action speed, or your skill speed, I should say. And it also gives you a rage on hit bonus. I think it's like 5 rage per attack or something like that. So it's like quite a nice buff. The skill speed is especially nice. There's also a turtle that spawns there, very big turtle, and I assume that one has quite a lot of life. And that one has kind of a ring around it, an aura type ring. Not very big, but while you're standing in it, you get increased defenses. So that's also kind of a nice buff. And there's another caster that gets spawned as well, which uses like a jade freeze, or I don't know whether it's an action speed slow. It could be a stun. It uses like a jade spell that encases the monsters in jade. So that's quite nice as well. I found that these minions were dealing almost no damage. And obviously I didn't have any minion scaling, so whether they scale well with minion stuff, I'm actually not sure. But generally, the way how that skill works is that the minions gain your totem life modifiers. So they should have a decent amount of life, but in terms of damage, they didn't seem to really be doing much. There's also the monkey there, which was the one that was actually shown in the original, teaser, in the opening reveal trailer, which I don't really know what that one does. It doesn't seem to give you a buff. It sort of charges at monsters and knocks them out of the way, but in terms of damage, they weren't really doing much of anything. So I played that briefly with a little bit of a totem spec on the tree as well, and that really didn't feel that great, so I spec'd out of that and went into Armor Breaker, which felt much better. So overall, I would say on the Warbringer, right now I'm not too satisfied with how the build feels, just because I think it's a gearing problem. Like, I can already see that it's a gearing problem. I don't have good enough resistances, which I'm kind of stuck on solving because I don't have Artificer Orbs, and items are not dropping, things like that. So I'm going to kind of take this build until I have Stampede, and I also have the second Ascendancy node for negative armor. Once I have those things, I'm going to test the build to see how it feels at that point. And if I'm enjoying it, I'll carry on playing. If I feel like the build's not really my sort of thing, I might then re-roll into something else, or I might continue leveling the Witch. I actually have some ideas for other builds that I really want to try out. But right now I'm going to continue this one just because I want to see it through to see what it's going to feel like. And at the end of this video, I'll just do a bit of kind of general impression of Path of Exile 2, because obviously I did play in Los Angeles, but that was a bit of a limited playtest. You know, I didn't really have too much ability to actually play the game in the comfort of my own home, just be able to play it for a while and get an overall impression of the game. And right now, I feel like Path of Exile 2 has the basis to be an absolutely incredible ARPG. It has everything's kind of already in place. And all of the problems that I've discussed here in this video, and one thing I haven't discussed, by the way, is balance, but all of those problems can be fixed very easily. You know, it's a case of we increase the drop rate of Artificer's Orbs, and we balance skills out. Right now, the balance feels a little bit wonky, but those things can be solved very easily, whereas the groundwork of Path of Exile 2, that is already in an incredible place. Bosses feel amazing, like progressing bosses, ability usage, all that stuff just feels so good. The game looks incredible, the sound design is incredible, comboing abilities together feels great. My overall impressions of Path of Exile 2 is that this game is just that good, like it's so good. And over time I can just see all of these problems with gearing and things like that, they're all going to be solved. I'm just hyped to play more Path of Exile 2 basically. How have you guys been getting on? Let me know how you're progressing on your first character, maybe it's your second character. Let me know by commenting below. And thanks for watching this video. And as always, stay tuned and stay safe.